What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So for the past couple of months, everybody has been hyping the fire decks, in general, as if they were gonna be tier 0, even though it is true, they will be tier 0 collectively. People are sleeping like crazy on the other decks, like Silent Forcer is one of those really good decks that can actually compete with full power fire decks such as Fire King Snake Eyes and Pure Snake Eyes and some other decks like Rescue Ace as well. And there's a lot of really good reasons to that. It has a lot of room for non-engine, it can play with like 1 or 2 cards, and it is very, immune almost, I want to say, to most hand traps, and even Droll, which is the only hand trap that kind of can do something against you, you can still play around it very, very well, granted you know what you're doing. So yeah, this deck gets a very bad rep because I want to say most people who played the deck, they don't really play it correctly, and then they just give it the image that it loses really hard to Droll, when in reality, that's not really true. So yeah, today I'm here to change your mind about this deck and to give you a very good deck list in order to help you out with your game plan if you choose to go with this deck at a future tournament. But anyways, before we proceed any further, I would really appreciate if you could smash the like and subscribe button for me real quick. It really helps me out a lot. If this video can get to 1,000 likes, I will be making a live stream on it. Also, please check out my sponsors, Inspire TCG as well as Dueling. That will also help me out a lot. Thank you so much. Both links will be in the description box below. And now let's get right into it. Alright, so first things first, the first combo, assuming that I have, like, let's say Novox and the Ritual spell and my opponent has Droll, or I can't tell that my opponent has Droll. What is the correct play here? Obviously, normal summon Novox, that's my only option. Am I getting the spell or the trap? I am getting the spell card, because one search is all I need. I feel like most players here, they would be searching the Saphira, but the issue is searching Saphira here plays very hard into Droll, and it doesn't get you that much more than just searching the Skull Guardian outright, because now you can Ritual Summon under the Droll, and you can still provide back your Novox, so that you still have an Omni Negate as well as the protection with the barrier through the Droll. The number one trap here, again, would be searching Saphira, or searching something that just literally does nothing, or like searching the trap card even, and try to play on the opponent's turn, but there is no reason to do that because, again, your hand is completely immune to Droll and Logbird. Hard drawing Novox is one of the best things that you can have if you want to be able to beat the Droll and Logbird, because if your first search is barrier, searching something, you are usually in a very good position. But yeah, that's obviously a very simple quote-unquote combo. I mean, I only really did one action. Let's get into some slightly more complicated things. Alright, so in this situation, I have Silent Forcing Barrier as well as Seravis, and my opponent has Droll again. I can't predict, but the goal is to always make the right decision. So my first action is going to be Barrier and search the Novox. By the way, if you have a bunch of search cards, I always recommend using Barrier first. The reason for that is because, again, you really want to prioritize Novox access as early as possible. This card is just insane. So yeah, we're going to be eating the Droll here, which means that we literally have no way of Ritual Summoning right away, because we don't have, the Skull Guardian or the Ritual Spell or whatever. But we can still place the Authority, and then use its effect in order to shuffle back a Ritual Monster Ritual Spell from our hand to the field, and then summon the Seravis. And then on the opponent's turn, we're still going to have 2 interruptions through the Droll, because whenever our opponent activates a card effect, we can tag out that Seravis and then summon the Ritual Monster. It's a cheat summon, it's not considered an actual Ritual Summon. So if you got like Dynamundo and you can summon it like later on, you will not be able to revive back that Skull Guardian, so just keep that in mind. Ritual Monsters, they kind of follow the same rule as extra deck monsters, even though they were kind of like main deck monsters in a way. They were extra deck monsters in the main deck. That's the best way to put it, actually. They're basically like almost like fusion monsters. But yeah, now we got the Omni Negate from the Seravis, the protection from the barrier, as well as Authority having the ability to destroy 1 card our opponent controls, because we have a Ritual Monster. So that's actually a very good setup through the Droll, and with, I want to say, it's a very average hand. It's really just Novox and it was Barrier, I believe? Yeah, it was Barrier with any Ritual Monster or Ritual Spell. It can play through Droll super easy. So yeah, that's it for this one. Let's get into combo number 3, which is, yet again, way more complicated. Alrighty, so in this hand, I have Diviner, Saphira, Pre-Prep, and my opponent has Droll and Imperm. So what is the best way I can go about that? Because I want to say it's very easy to just make one single microscopic misplay and completely lose. But even through 2 hand traps, you can still make a really fat board, which is actually really sick. But yeah, first action is Pre-Prep. It's not Saphira. You really want to prioritize having a Ritual Monster and a Ritual Spell while still having potential Ritual Materials, just in case you get Drolled, because you're going to see this in a second. So obviously we get Drolled here after our first search. There is realistically no reason to ever hold the Droll for like after search number 1. You always use Droll as early as possible. But now we can't rely on Saphira to search something, which is fine. And the Diviner can eat an Imperm, which is also fine because it actually doesn't kill us here. It really doesn't do anything because now we can go for the Silent Forcing Prayer, and we're going to be tributing the Diviner as well as the Saphira to summon the Skull Guardian. Now, this is one of the most interesting things about this deck, or rather, not necessarily about the deck, but rather about the ritual summon, ritual mechanic. Basically, the way it works is if you want to overpay for a ritual summon, you can do it as long as one of the materials doesn't have the same level as the ritual monster that you're trying to summon. So for example, in this situation, Saphira is level 6. So you are allowed to use a 6 and a 2 in order to overpay for a level 7 monster, which is the Skull Guardian. With that being said, if this Saphira was not a Saphira, but rather like a Seravis or another Skull Guardian, we would not be able to also use Diviner. We would only be able to use the level 7, because you are not allowed to overpay when you are already fulfilling the full ritual material cost with one single monster. So keep that in mind, this is extremely important. So the fact that Saphira is level 6 here is extremely beneficial because now we get to tribute the Diviner, and since we are tributing the Diviner, we can trigger its graveyard effect in order to summon Novox from deck, and then place the trap card from the field, and then we can use its effect right away because we got the ritual spell in the grave, and we can summon that Seravis from the deck, which can also evolve itself into the ritual Seravis, which is going to yield 3 interruptions because we have the Omni Negate from the Skull Guardian, the Solemn Warning from the ritual Seravis that we summon off of the main deck Seravis, and the trap card that can destroy 2 cards our opponent controls. All of that through a Droll and Logboard and Infinite Impermanence. That is extremely good. Alrighty, so for combo number 4, just before we proceed any further, this one is so beautiful that you can't continue without smashing the like and subscribe button. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It really means the world to me. But this hand is very, very, very interesting. And if you don't know how to play it out, you are going to be so incredibly confused. But trust me, it can actually play through 2 correctly used hand traps. So you got Diviner of the Herald, Novox, and Saphira. What to do? If we get like double hand trapped, how we can play this one out? Well, first of all, you always use the search cards in the smartest way possible. So in this situation, the correct thing to do is Saphira in order to search the Skull Guardian, since we already have Novox access, so we can threaten a ritual summon. And we're going to be getting hit by the Droll here. That is completely fine, so now we can bait an opponent's Veiler and Infinite Impermanence by going normal summon the Diviner. Not normal summon Novox, alright? Because Novox is what we call an unclassified effect, meaning that it's kind of like a continuous effect to treat itself as the full material for a Light Warrior Dragon Ritual monster, but only while its effect is not negated. So you can use Novox as the full material for Skull Guardian in the hand, or in face down even, but not if it gets impermed. So in other words, it's actually safer to hold in your hand instead of having to normal summon to risk getting hit by Infinite Impermanence. The Diviner is the correct way to bait an additional hand trap here. And now we can go Saphira, get rid of the Novox to summon the Skull Guardian. This cannot surge because of the Droll and Logboard. We summon the Novox, and this is where it gets absolutely crazy. So the Novox can place the trap card from the deck, and then you can summon what from the deck? Very interesting, huh? We're going to be shuffling back the ritual spell and summon not the Seravis, but rather something more interesting, which is the Saphira number 2. And we got a level 2 tuner as well as a level 6 non-tuner on the field. So you can go for an actual Synchro Starter's Dragon, revive back the Diviner, and then go for a Baron de Fleur. So you have an inherent way to access a second Omni Negate in this deck, just in case it comes up. But we're not done yet, because now that we have another Omni Negate, we are safe to go into a Danamundo without having to be afraid of Nibiru. And we can pass turn here. And on the opponent's draw phase, we can tag out the Dynamundo, revive back the Skull Guardian because it was properly summoned, and trigger the Novox in order to place the continuous spell from the deck to the field. And just like that, we've got the full protection as well as the power from Authority and an Omni Negate of Baron de Fleur. So we got 3 interruptions with 3 cards through 2 hand traps. That is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, what were people saying again? That this deck loses to Droll? This deck loses to Veiler Imperm? This deck loses to Ash? This deck loses to Nibiru? No. This deck doesn't lose to anything as long as you know what you're doing. But yeah, that's it for the combos. Let's get into the deck profile now. Alrighty, so for the deck list, there's a lot of ways to approach this. You can play either with hand traps or board breakers. All I recommend is to not try to mix both, and also be conscious of deck building patterns. So for example, if you're playing Prosperity with hand traps makes no sense, because going second, your Prosperity, every time you're seeing hand traps off of it, they're just basically blanks. So you're wasting a lot of like potential power from that prosperity. If you're going first and you're using prosperity, it's usually just for consistency cards or ways to potentially navigate your way around Droll by searching Novox or Diviner of the Herald, because these two cards are your best friends to play around Droll, or even Called by the Grave, I guess. Going second, though, Prosperity with Board Breakers is absolutely ridiculous. It's extremely strong, but again, with hand traps, it's too late because your opponent already has a board. So that is why I dislike Prosperity in the standard build, but in this particular version of the Board Breakers, it makes a lot of sense, and it's going to add a lot of desirable consistency to the deck, because this deck has 15 power plays, so the 3 pre-preparation of Rites, which searches you the ritual spell, as well as either Skull Guardian or Seravis, which is really important because Seravis is kind of like an infinite impermanence for Valor and Imperm on your Diviner and Novox. So it's a good card, and it's also a good card to ritual summon, and Skull Guardian is the heart and soul of the deck, as well as Novox, obviously. Diviner of the Herald and Novox are both your 1-card combos, and then Silent Forcing Barrier is not a 1-card combo, but almost. It gets you there eventually. And Saphira is almost the exact same thing as a pre-prep, because you're searching a monster just like pre-prep, but instead of searching the ritual spell, you're getting the ritual spell in the grave, and you're also getting Saphira in the grave, which mimics the effect of the ritual spell. But if anything, it's better because you don't have to use a light monster to use Saphira. So in other words, Saphira combos with Kashtira Fenrir, whereas the ritual spell, it doesn't. You really need ritual monsters. You really need light monsters, which is the reason why people have been considering Nibiru as a hand trap in this deck. Even if it's not necessarily always the best, you can at least use it to ritual summon, so it has no real drawback. But for the Board Breakers, what I really do recommend, Enemy Controller is one of the most interesting ones. It has a very nice interaction with Diviner of the Herald. You can tribute your Diviner of the Herald that's being targeted by Valor and Imperm through your Enemy Controller, and then potentially steal an opponent's monster. And since you tributed your Diviner, not only are you dodging negation, but also you are triggering its graveyard effect in order to summon the Novox. So you're getting a lot of gas with Enemy Controller and Diviner, and it really gives you the ability to push through boards. Now, I'm also playing two really identical cards, almost, Super Poly and Forbidden Droplet. What they have in common is that in tandem with search cards, they allow you to dodge Droll and Logbird. I've already made a video about that in the past, but basically when you are searching a card on the resolution, if you are the turn player, you can exert your right of turn player priority in order to use a spell speed 2 or higher effect right away. And since you are using Super Poly or Forbidden Droplet, if you are at least if you're using Droplet to send a monster, your opponent cannot respond with a monster. So in other words, since your opponent cannot respond with Droll on the resolution of your search, you are going to be delaying Droll by 1 action. You're not necessarily going to be negating or stopping Droll altogether. Sometimes just delaying the Droll by 1 search is all you need, because if you got like a pre-prep search searching like the ritual spell and the ritual monster, you still need to rely on Skull Guardian searching the Novox. So just delaying that Droll by 1 search is all you need. So that's the reason why Super Poly and Droplet are really, really good in this deck. And also this deck doesn't really need its extra deck space too much. So being able to play cards like Guilty Gearfried, Muddragon of the Swamp, Garura, and Dragon Knight Draco Quest will definitely carry you like crazy. So yeah, I really like these cards in this deck. And also Triple Tactic Talents, fantastic card. So if you really do lose to Droll, well, now you really don't, because you're going to be able to break boards and also look at people's hands. And that it's just a good card overall, especially in this format. I think Talents is fantastic. And yeah, the rest of the deck, I mean, is very obvious. So yeah, 15 power cards, like I said, the few bricks, so Trias. Drawing Trias and Diviner is not a brick though, because then you can tribute the Diviner. And instead of sending the Trias, you're sending like Herald of Arclight or Entis to break boards. And the Seravis main deck monster is kind of like a brick, unfortunately. And the trap card is also a brick. So you only got like 2 to 3 bad cards in the deck, and everything else is very good. I really like this version. But anyways, for the extra deck, the Super Poly targets Herald of Arclight as well as Entis. Chaos Angel, you can actually summon this using Novox and Trias Hierarcha. So it's actually realistic. It's not completely impossible to summon, and it's also a level 10 monster. So I guess if you got like Axial Synchro that you can climb into, but it's not necessarily relevant. But yeah, Axial Synchro and Baron de Fleur, I showed the combo already. Typhon, because it's super easy to summon. And then a couple of Link monsters that might come up every now and then. Dino Mundo is the only real one that's super relevant, but the other ones are just honestly not super relevant. For the side deck now, 3 Ash as well as 3 Bell, because you want to decrease the likelihood of Labyrinth being able to set up a Dimensional Barrier on your turn. So if you can negate Big Welcome Labyrinth, that is at least going to help you out. Dimensional Barrier is one of the few ways you can actually lose, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Book of Eclipse or Book of Moon, whatever, as long as you have an out to Expurely Noir or the Centurion King Calamity FTK, quote-unquote, the turn skip, You really have to be able to stop that, and Book of Eclipse at least can take care of a lot of those threats. And also you can, it's a good card against like monsters that don't, well, I mean, not really monsters, but decks that don't really make Omni Negates like Ashtira. If they end on like Unicorn, Fenrir, Shangri-La, whatever, you can Book of Eclipse everything and you should be fine. Then Soul Release, this is insane against Fire King going second, which is also the reason why I don't really like hand traps too much, because if you got a hand traps and board breakers, sometimes your hand traps kind of do most of the job, but not really, and then board breakers don't really do anything because your opponent goes for a completely different line. It just doesn't really do anything anymore. But if you only got board breakers, then they have a lot of impact. And finally, Summon Limit as your going first card, as well as Odd Eyes Pendulum Grab Dragon that you can side in against Despia. Very good card actually, because this negates the spell effect, not the spell activation. So even if your opponent has Branded Lost and goes for Branded Fusion, you can negate that safely, and then your opponent cannot even go for another Branded Fusion. Whereas Skull Guardian and Baron de Fleur, I don't really like the way they negate Branded Fusion, because you're negating the activation, and Branded Fusion is you can only activate one Branded Fusion per turn, not you can only use, so they can go for another one, whereas if you're negating the effect again, they cannot do that. So Odd Eyes Pendulum Grab Dragon, not really good going second, so that is the reason why I'm not main decking it, but going first, it is one of the best cards that you can go into, and it's also searchable, so I really like the card. That's it for this video. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Peace.